See, here's the thing. I told her to not do it for the Vine, but she went ahead and did it anyway. And now she got herself murdered, and we got ourselves a situation. A video review. You like the black and white? It looks awesome, doesn't it? Hey everyone, David here, trying to play as many Rockstar games as possible. Here I am to review the one that they didn't really develop in the first place. LA Noire. In an LA Noire, World War II veteran Cole Phelps roams the streets as an LAPD detective in order to rid the City of Angels from its criminal underground. Don't smoke, kids. Now, like I stated, this is not really developed by Rockstar so much so as it is them simply just presenting the game, executive producing, so to speak. And the true developers behind this game are a developer called Team Bondi. So it's almost like back in the 80s when Steven Spielberg would present Back to the Future or present The Goonies, but he never really directed it, but you can still feel his stamp throughout the movie. It's similar here. You can kind of feel Rockstar's input throughout the game. There's several different mechanics and things that work in a way that they would in a Rockstar game. But then there's other moments where you can kind of tell that Team Bondi's trying to catch up with Rockstar in terms of quality because the seams start to show a little bit. And because of that, an awful lot of people didn't find LA Noire to be one of the strongest Rockstar games despite this not being an actual Rockstar production. But I gotta be honest, I'm against the current here. I actually really enjoy this game. First of all, I found the story to be quite compelling. I admit it started off as a case of the week kind of deal where you would just move on from case to case and they weren't really stringed together, and the only form of cohesive storytelling would be these flashbacks that you would get in between each case, giving you some background story on your main character, Cole Phelps. But as it went along, it started to become a lot more cohesive, and they started to string together these cases so that they made sense to one another, and it started to get filled with twists and turns, some that I didn't see coming, but others that I did telegraph a little bit beforehand. And I wasn't too keen on the whole insurance policy jargon that they kind of put into the game towards the end of it. Especially when you get to the arson desk. It's all about insurance money and policies and who gets compensated for what, and it kind of took me out a little bit, but that's mainly because I wasn't able to keep up with that sort of jargon. In keeping up with Rockstar tradition, all the characters in this game are really well written, and they're given some really good dialogue. They act and they talk and they feel like characters that would exist in the 1940s. Everybody on the cast gives some movie quality acting. Even some people that are in the game for like, what, 2 minutes? They act like they're in the movie. They act like they're in a production that deserves to be given the proper performance. Even if their character is killed off in like 5 minutes or so, they're giving it their all, and I gotta give them credit where credit is due. And whether it's some really badass characters like Cole Phelps himself and Jack Kelso, or some really slimy characters like Roy Earl, who's just I hated him. I hated him more than the actual murderers and rapists and criminals in the game. How does that happen? They're still really well written and really well acted. My only complaint with the characters would be more in Cole Phelps. There are certain moments where I felt like he was just being a little too hard on the people that he was interviewing when he didn't really need to be. Like, this woman just lost her husband or her house or whatever, and Cole Phelps is all like, somebody was murdered, ma'am. You gotta give me something. I'm just like, dude, chill. And there's a twist with his character that, in terms of the story, it was very interesting, and it really propelled things into some really intriguing motion. But in terms of his character, I felt like it was quite unexplained as to why that would happen, and because it was unexplained, it felt a little out of character. Now, being that Rockstar is executive producing, this game's gonna have some major Rockstar money behind it, and it shows in the presentation of this game. It looks rather gorgeous. 1940s Los Angeles looks very authentic with some beautiful graphics, and the facial animations that they used on these characters using this new form of technology where they filmed almost every part of their face so that they captured every single muscle movement and tissue so that it would benefit your experience, being that you have to interrogate these people and you need to read their faces to tell whether or not they're lying. It looks great. It starts to dip their toes in the pool that is the uncanny valley a little bit, but I still find it to be very interesting. And I don't know, it just fit this game rather well, being that it's much more of an authentic game. And nothing that is so ridiculous that it becomes fantasy or science fiction, it fit. However, the gorgeousness of this game lasts for only so long because almost everything good about this game has something bad about it in terms of its presentation. Despite being rather ambitious with their facial animations, the seams start to show a little bit when it comes to the head being connected to the character body models. Like, there'll be certain female characters where they'll be wearing some sort of bare shoulder dress and the only thing that separates the neck from the body would be this pearl necklace. But whenever they would move their head, the camera would also capture the muscle movement of their neck. And being that that's all they captured and they didn't really capture anything else when it comes to the shoulder, you can kind of tell where the connection is because you can see the muscle tissue moving here, but then here it's completely still. So you can kind of see the disjointment of the head and the body. And this goes for some of the male characters as well, even though they're not wearing dresses. Sometimes there would be a certain character that would be moving their head a little bit, but the rest of the body would be staying still, and so that became a little apparent as the game went on. Despite being really authentic when it comes to their portrayal of 1940s LA, it also reminded me that 1940s LA is not very interesting. There's an awful lot of grays and browns, and it's just not very interesting to explore, and there's really not much to do. I mean, you can't really do anything besides go to the place that you need to go to in order to progress in the case, or just free roam and investigate the city without having to really do anything. I mean, it's not like Grand Theft Auto where you can go bowling or where you can go shoot darts or get drunk or something like that. That wasn't really a focal point in this game, being that Rockstar's not so much developing it as simply just overseeing it. And there were some glaring glitches in this game. They didn't happen very frequently, but when they happened, they were immensely apparent, especially during some of the cutscenes. Somebody would be getting into an invisible car or would be contorting somewhere, and I'm like, what? But if there's any merit that I can give towards the presentation of this game is getting the aspect ratio right. You guys heard my complaint in the Beyond Two Souls review where they went ahead and they stretched the image because they couldn't get that aspect ratio right. Here they did. I'm playing it on my standard definition television, which is a square, not a rectangle, and they went ahead and they shrunk the image without compromising any of it during the cutscenes, but when it cut back to gameplay, they would have those black bars disappear and switch back to the usual 16:9. Being that they're going for a cinematic feel with their game in terms of the direction and the cinematography, they went ahead and kept the aspect ratio right, corresponding to the television that you're playing. So kudos to that. That's how you do it, Quantic Dream. So one of the things that everybody was talking about when this game came out back in 2011 was the gameplay. How you would go about being a detective and investigating the crime scene. And the mechanics work, and they play out more like a point-and-click adventure where when something would happen in terms of the case, you would drive to the crime scene, investigate the crime scene, and then you go off from there in terms of whatever clues you manage to gather, whether it be persons of interest or certain articles discovered at the scene or addresses that you need to call up the operator and get an address for, and you just go to those places, conduct your interrogations or your interviews, as well as simply just investigate the area and take a look around without a search warrant. 1940s rules were a little bit different than they are now. And unfortunately, I'm going to have to agree somewhat to what most people say, and that is that after about a good maybe 2-3 hours into the game, the mechanics start to become a little repetitive. The things that you need to do in order to progress in the case are pretty much the same from case to case. Investigate the crime scene, talk to your POIs, gather clues, engage in maybe 1 or 2 set pieces, and then get the bad guy. But the fact that they go ahead and they change the people that are involved, they change the cases, they change the scenarios, they change the setting, it manages to keep it fresh enough to keep me intrigued and keep me wanting to play the next case. And with the exception of the first interrogation that you need to get right in order to progress, I mean, there's no other way to do it, the interrogations have different outcomes, and it's not necessarily as involved as, say, you know, Walking Dead, where you got different people surviving by the end of the episode depending on your choices. It's a little bit more linear than that, but at the end of each case, the game tallies up your stats, the amount of money that you got, the amount of money that you costed in damage across the city, running over people. But it also gives you a little pointer at the bottom telling you that, hey, you might have resolved the case a different way you would have done this. And it actually did inflict a genuine feeling in me that made me go, wow, why did I not just do that? And it's very hard to invoke that kind of feeling, especially when your mechanics start to become a little repetitive. But at the end of every case, it would actually make me think back to the case and make me think like, okay, what could I have done to have made this case go by faster and be more prominent in my investigation. The set pieces that I was talking about, which include gunfights and chase sequences and even hand-to-hand combat, are quite entertaining, but they were never really that difficult. I died maybe about 4 times throughout the entire playthrough, and I'm not even joking, all 4 times was me just trying to get across this stupid beam, trying to balance myself on the beam. It was a pain in the ass. Now at the end of every desk, they allow you to free roam. They allow you to roam the streets of LA, which is very considerate, but it's also kind of useless considering the fact that, like I told you, there's not much to really explore when it comes to 1940s LA because of the fact that not only does it look a little boring, but also because you can't really go anywhere and do anything other than the things that Team Bonnie went ahead and put in the game in order to give completists something to do, such as gather newsreels and discover landmarks, things like that. The only thing that encourages not only exploration during the main campaign, but also replay value after you have beaten it, would be these newspaper articles that you can find not only in crime scenes, but also throughout the city, that give you, every time you encounter a new newspaper headline, it shows a cutscene that kind of gives you a glimpse into what's going on within the story, whether it be something that has to do with the case that you're doing or something that has to do with the main story as a whole. And I highly recommend that you go around and try to find as many of these newspaper headings as possible, because they really give you some insight into the story that you wouldn't have known otherwise if you hadn't explored and found these newspapers. So maybe because of the fact that it was Rockstar who was overseeing this game, a lot of people had high expectations, and because of that they felt a little disappointed after having beaten this game. But being that I knew ahead of time that Rockstar was simply just overseeing it and not developing it, my expectations were rather, I wouldn't say low, but a lot lower than most people. And because of that, I managed to enjoy the game more than almost everybody else did. Granted, I'm probably not going to replay it anytime soon, but I still enjoyed myself a lot, putting myself in the gumshoes, that's a play on words, anyways, putting myself in the shoes of Cole Phelps. I give LA Noire an 8 out of 10. So before I wrap up, I'm going to go ahead and comment on the DLC real quick. Right before I played this, the PSN had some sort of sale on the season pass of LA Noire that gave me practically every piece of DLC except for one case. There was one case that for some reason they didn't give it to me. I don't know if it's like an exclusive or something, but that's it. Just one case was omitted from the season pass. Everything else I got, and the season pass covered 2 suits that Cole Phelps can wear. I can't remember what they were called, but one amplifies his shooting abilities and the other his hand-to-hand combat. And I gotta be honest, despite giving Cole Phelps something else to wear and not look that boring from time to time, I could hardly tell the difference when it came to the amplification of those attributes. And besides an extra little mode to give completists something else to do, which is to find all of these badges that are scattered throughout the city, the main attraction to the season pass would be all the cases that you're given. And the cases are just what you expect. Extra cases, extra scenarios, extra murders and things like that for you to investigate, and just give you some more time to play LA Noire in case you really didn't like it that much, like I did. And I really did enjoy these cases. Now, one thing that I'm a little bit mixed when it comes to these cases is that on the good side, these cases do in fact tie in with the main story. There will be a character that would make some sort of reference to another character or to a particular plot point that has to do with the main campaign, and I found that incredibly interesting and rather neat. But on the negative side, I'm not saying that this is true, but it does lead to suspicions of deletion. Suspicion of deletion is what I like to call when developers intentionally delete certain things from a game, whether it be certain missions or, in this case, certain cases, and they withhold them and then release them later on as DLC when from the very beginning they were meant to be part of the main game. Don't do that, okay? And I don't know for sure if that's what Team Bondi did in here, but it does lead to suspicion of that sort of activity because of the fact that they do tie in with the main story. I don't have any evidence to prove this true, no pun intended, but you can't blame me for being a little suspicious of this. So if you guys enjoyed my review of LA Noire and would like to purchase the game, be sure to use the link in the description below. It would really help me out a lot. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll catch you guys next time. Dramatic walk away.